In the late 90s, we almost got a fourth live-action Ninja Turtles film that would have featured a fifth turtle, an evil April O'Neil, and a return to the dark and gritty tone of the first film. So let's dive in and find out why it never happened and what could have been Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 4. Ninjas were all the rage in the 1980s, thanks to 1981's Enter the Ninja, which sparked a ninja craze in American popular culture, leading to a boom in ninja-themed products and media being produced.
Ninja from Kawasaki.
And a product of this craze was the creation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic series, which would give rise to a cartoon, a trilogy of movies, a toy line, video games, and even a concert tour, becoming a craze all its own, known as Turtlemania.
Hello, Barbara.
Hello, how charming.
And while Turtlemania initially gained momentum through the incredibly popular children's cartoon, it was the dark, gritty, and more mature motion picture that truly propelled it to new heights, ultimately becoming the most successful independent film ever made at the time. And part of what made it so successful is it didn't pander to kids, but it didn't alienate them either, as it crossed age groups. And that's because the film's director, Steve Barron, the same guy who made Michael Jackson's Billie Jean music video and a-ha's iconic Take On Me, wanted to make a film that more closely resembled the mature tone from the original comics, while still appealing to kids who loved the animated series. The film had drama, dealt with mature themes like grief and loss, fathers and sons, family, not fitting in, and the corruption of today's youth, which was not only very topical but turned out to be pretty meta, considering the moral panic from parents that would follow the film's release. It also had great performances from the entire cast, top to bottom, and it had several great fight scenes where the turtles didn't always come out on top, adding plenty of stakes. Not only that, but it had a killer soundtrack, moody and murky cinematography, depicting a grimy, dirty version of New York City that I'm not even sure exists anymore, and of course Jim Henson's absolutely incredible turtle costumes, complete with state-of-the-art animatronics. Plus, it featured a young Sam Rockwell in one of his first ever big screen roles. Straight up, this movie was
awesome! Righteous! Bossa Nova!
And it still holds up today, which is why it's such a shame that the sequel got rid of everything that made the first film so successful, following a massive backlash from parents, who objected to the film's violence and use of weapons. Worried that Turtlemania would be a short-lived fad, Secret of the Ooze was rushed into production and released exactly 1 year after the first film, which is an insanely short amount of time for a sequel to come out that wasn't shot in tandem with the original. The man largely responsible for the tone of the original film was director Steve Barron, whose work on the movie even impressed Steven Spielberg. Unfortunately, Barron wasn't asked to return for the sequel, having actually been fired during post-production on the original film over creative differences, after his first cut of the movie was deemed too dark. Plus, he went behind the producer's back and tried to raise additional money to ensure his vision came to fruition. After parting ways with him, the producers would then cut several scenes out of the movie to lighten the tone, resulting in the version we got. And with Barron gone, it would open the door for the producers to give the sequel not only a much lighter, more family-friendly tone, but make it a lighter looking film as well, devoid of any of Barron's signature style and flair, and resembling something made for TV, which is pretty apropos considering they hired a director who largely worked in TV. In an effort to appease parents and tone down the violence, the Turtles mostly fight via hand-to-hand combat this time, rarely if ever using their weapons on the bad guys.
I think in this movie we've taken away their weapons and given them other things to play with, such as the yo-yo, things that they can directly pick up or find that would be not construed as weapons, but the way they use them is very funny.
Both Elias Koteas and Judith Hoag weren't asked to return. In Judith's case, she allegedly complained too much on the first film about the violence and grueling shooting schedule, while Elias's character, Casey Jones, was deemed too dark for children, even though he was a fan favorite. He'd be replaced with Ernie Reyes Jr., who was cast as a new, more family-friendly character named Kino, after the producers enjoyed working with him as Donatello's martial arts double on the first film. And while the voice actors behind Leo and Mikey reprised their roles, Corey Feldman sadly didn't return to voice Donatello after pleading no contest to a drug possession charge, and neither did the only actor to do both the voice and in-suit performance, Josh Pace, as Raphael. Allegedly, Pace was claustrophobic and wasn't keen to return to do another movie in the suit.
You're a claustrophobic.
The hardest part is the heat and the weight, and like the 8th hour into the day, how do I still seem light on my feet when like the whole costume is soaked up 30 pounds of my sweat?
Not only that, but as the producers tried to include Bebop and Rocksteady in the film, the creators of the comic, Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird, objected, finding the characters stupid and annoying. Instead, Toka and Razor were created, which just felt like the no-name brand versions of Bebop and Rocksteady. Although the producers didn't complain, as new villains created specifically for the film meant they'd get a piece of the royalties versus using characters that had already been created by Eastman and Laird or for the animated series. And of course we can't talk about Secret of the Ooze without mentioning Vanilla Ice, who was included in the film at the insistence of SBK, the record label producing the film's soundtrack. If the first film crossed age groups appealing to both kids and adults alike, the sequel was firmly a children's movie, and not a very good one at that, which is why for the third film the producers tried to create something in between, yet failed spectacularly. Even a returning Casey Jones and Corey Feldman couldn't save it. And if you ever wondered why the film was about the turtles traveling back in time to 17th century feudal Japan, it's because not only did the producers want to capitalize off the incredibly popular video game Turtles in Time, but they wanted to capture the incredibly lucrative Japanese market too, which at the time was the #1 market for foreign films. Ironically, to this day, the film has not yet been released in Japan. Also, if it wasn't glaringly obvious, Jim Henson's Creature Shop wasn't asked back to do the costumes, as the producers opted for the much cheaper All Effects Group instead, and the results speak for themselves. After the failure of the third film, Ninja Turtles creators Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird hunkered down and came up with an idea that would return the series to the darker and grittier tone of the first film. Titled The Next Mutation, the film would have seen Splinter and the Turtles undergo a secondary mutation that would affect each of them differently, granting them new powers and appearances. Donatello was given the least obvious mutation, as he would gain telekinetic and telepathic abilities, but at the expense of his eyesight, hence his vision-enhancing goggles. He'd also designed an updated techno version of his bow staff. Leonardo's new mutation was the ability to morph his skin into a kind of chrome-like surface, making it impenetrable. He was also given a utility belt and extended his bandana to cover the top of his head. Michelangelo was given a more street look, as his new mutation gave him the ability to project a human appearance onto his turtle features, allowing him to interact freely with humans. And Raphael was given the ability to morph into Raptor Raph, complete with big, gnashy teeth and claws to complement his big, gnashy personality. Eastman and Laird also wanted Splinter to have a much more active part in the battles that the turtles fought, so gave him the ability to morph as well, into a big, muscular super rat. Unfortunately, little is known about the film, as it didn't progress much beyond the initial stages. And that's because first-time screenwriters Christian Ford and Roger Soffer auditioned for the writing job on the basis of a previously unproduced screenplay and a pitch for a fourth film called Four Turtles and a Baby. New Line liked the pitch, while Eastman and Laird hated it, but loved their screenplay, resulting in the young scribes being hired. Together, the four men would work closely to come up with an absolutely bonkers idea that Ford and Soffer would then write, called The Foot Walks Again. The film would have seen the Turtles interact with an alternate universe reminiscent of the dystopian Hill Valley from Back to the Future 2. Living in this parallel dimension would have been an evil, corrupted, and hypersexualized version of April O'Neil, a version of Casey Jones with electromagnetic hands, and a new Ninja Turtle named Kirby, in homage to the legendary comic book artist Jack Kirby. Kirby would have been more hardcore than the other Turtles as a result of living and surviving in this dystopian version of New York, overrun and populated with highly trained foot soldiers who carried guns, and even a cyber foot soldier with a cloak, possibly part of Shredder's elite Foot Clan, who would have been alive in this alternate reality. The script would have taken elements from the comic storyline City at War, which saw New York thrown into a faction war between the Foot Clan and Shredder's still loyal Foot Elite. As the escalating violence threatens to tear the city apart, the Turtles make a deal for peace with the Foot in return for aiding them in destroying Shredder's elite. The film would have contained a lot of high-tech bionics too, which many of the characters and villains in the film would weaponize and wear, including this character named Spider, who would eventually transform into the Nano Spider. To realize all of these ambitious characters and creatures, Eastman planned to go back to Jim Henson's Creature Shop, as he and the team not only wanted to return to the look and feel of the first film, but they also wanted to make it for adults, not children, going even darker, grittier, and violent than Turtles 1 was. Unfortunately, the script would enter development hell, undergoing dozens of rewrites at the hands of several different writers, apparently getting worse with each revision, as Eastman and Laird refused to settle for anything less than the quality of the first film, worried another Secret of the Ooze or Turtles 3 would kill the franchise for good. And as these constant rewrites would delay the film, Turtlemania, which was all the rage in the early 90s, would finally peter out. The once enormously popular Turtles cartoon, which started in 1987, would finally come to an end in 1996.
Aw, take a hike, man. See if we got some cartoons.
while a new live-action TV series, which would recycle some of the ideas from the unproduced fourth film, like a fifth turtle and even taking the name The Next Mutation, would only last one season before being cancelled. However, there'd be one final attempt in the early 2000s to make a fourth movie by none other than a returning Steve Barron, director of the first film. He'd team up with Brendan McCarthy, the concept and storyboard artist also on the first film, to pitch an idea to the Hallmark Channel, which would have seen the Turtles go up against their estranged fifth brother that they never knew they had. Tonally, it would have been a cross between the imaginative fun of Men in Black and the edginess of The Matrix, with a bit of visual poetry of Crouching Tiger thrown in. Plans called for a 2-night, 4-hour program that would have used live actors but CGI turtles. Barron envisioned a darker, more streetwise view of the characters and an atmospheric and spectacular reinvention of the franchise. Unfortunately, just like the other attempts, the project would never come to fruition, basically acting as a nail in the coffin for a fourth Turtles film. Thanks for watching, everybody, and don't forget to like and subscribe to Bullets and Blockbusters for more great content.